Love music, love life. You are listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. And it's a part of Smooth Breakfast. Here we dissect the top news from Nigerian dailies. Your thought, opinion, perspectives are welcome. And you can share them with us via WhatsApp. And the number to send them to is 0809 444 0981. Again, 0809 4440981. You can join the live stream on YouTube at Smooth 981 FM Lagos, at Smooth 981 FM Lagos. You can also drop your comments using the live chat option. My name is Oluwaseun, and joining me this morning to analyze the top news stories, please welcome with me Mr. Cee. Good morning.
Good morning, Oluwaseun. Good morning, Lagos.
Thank you for joining me, and we dive straight into the matter of the day, starting with this one coming from the Vanguard. Aviation workers to ground flights the 31st of March over custom officers' assault.
Okay, thank you, Oluwaseun. So I think 2 weeks ago, there was a clash between operatives of the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria and some customs operatives. And in the process, the Director of Security for the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria was allegedly detained or falsely imprisoned within a specific room or shed for at least 2 hours. And this is on the back of repeated attacks on fan operatives by customs officials and other operatives of other agencies. And the workers and the members of the airport unions have said enough is enough and that this has to come to an end, and that if their grievances are not sufficiently and properly addressed by the 31st of March this year, they will embark on the strike. Now, the 31st of March is next week, Monday.
Yeah.
So basically, the authorities, the concerned stakeholders, literally have up until Friday to find a workable solution. Now, it doesn't help the fact that the Nigerian Customs Service doesn't seem to understand the gravity of what transpired, and in a release by its spokesperson, described the said event as an episode of a miscommunication between fan operators and customs agents. Now, a very specific allegation was made. A very specific grievance was listed or stated. The customs state press statement did not address that specific grievance. And that has been the bane of the ordinary Nigerians when reading press statements or listening to press statements being read. They're very, very light on details. They just skim over everything. So here's hoping that the aviation authorities will be able to resolve this matter in time before the proposed strike, because another thing we've come to witness and notice is that when warnings or notices of impending strikes are given, the concerned stakeholders tend to be oblivious of the said notices and only react after the strike has started. We pray that this does not happen, because when these guys go on strike, domestic and international flights will be affected, and then people cannot move or travel to their various destinations for the various purposes for which they embark or for which they're embarking on the travel. Also, cue in the fact that traveling by road in Nigeria today is a 50-50 gamble. It's not entirely safe. So, yeah, because every day we hear multiple accounts of people being abducted forcefully whilst traveling on the road. So here's a passionate plea to all the concerned stakeholders. Let's resolve this and let the uniformed agencies, through their various heads, continue to reinforce the position that they cannot be indisciplined. There are rules of conduct, there are rules of engagement, and they cannot just resort to impunity in achieving their goals and objectives.
I'm just wondering at what you said about when warnings are given like this. Sometimes those who the warning is being said to do not catch it in time. And I'm wondering what else needs to be done for them to get the memo.
Well, so for me, that's the best. I think what happens or what has happened previously is they somewhat believe that the people giving the notices are bluffing. So it's literally like trying to call their bluff. Then when that fails, they then call them to the negotiating table and then try to iron out the differences. So I'm praying that this doesn't go the way of previous episodes.
But just on a final note on that one, do you think it's due to a possible thought, or is that reason enough for you to ground entire operations?
No, but think about it, Sean. Lately, we've been witnessing all sorts of assaults by operatives of different security agencies. So why would the director of the Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria be locked up in a shed for 2 hours? What is that about? What offense did he commit? And even if he committed an offense, is that the way to sort it out? What happened to filing a formal complaint before the Nigeria Police Force, which is a statutory body given the jurisdiction to deal with matters like that, where a criminal offense is alleged? So how can the customs be the accuser and be the jury and then be the judge? How does that work?
I mean, it's coming from a country where members and staff members of the distribution company were assaulted by soldiers over unpaid bills. Same country.
Yeah, sadly.
We move over to the Daily Trust, and this is still about the Rivers crisis. And this time they are taking it seriously, that statement of go to court. So the PDP governors are challenging the emergency rule at Supreme Court.
Okay. Thank you, Oluwaseun. So it's about time someone challenged this action, and the PDP governors do have a justiciable claim. Now, their point is simple. Going by the provisions of Section, I think 305 of the Nigerian Constitution 1999 as amended, there is a procedure to be followed before a state of emergency is declared anywhere. And in specific instances, the governor has to formally request that the president issue a state of emergency. Now, the reason why the Constitution was drafted that way is because, in theory, Nigeria is a federal country. In theory. In practice, we run more of a unitary system, and it's a fallout of the various military coups that have taken place in Nigeria. Now, the PDP governors are saying that there is nowhere in the Constitution that the president has any legal right to suspend a democratically elected governor, deputy governor, and members of the House of Assembly. That there is no provision known to the Constitution that permits that. Furthermore, they're challenging the procedure by which the president's proclamation was ratified, both in the House of Representatives and the Senate. Now, what the Constitution says is that for both chambers, 2/3 of all the members of the House, not members of the House present on that day. And the Constitution clearly does not mention a voice vote. Now, it's a principle of law that you have to take the provisions of the law as drafted by the draftsman. Now, what the House of Representatives and the Senate did that day on Thursday last week was, through their presiding officers, was to subject the matter to voice votes. Now, the challenge with that whole exercise is that, one, all the members were not present, all the members didn't vote. The Constitution requires that all the members of both chambers vote. We are aware that a sizable number of both chambers were in Mecca performing the Lesser Hajj, or what is called Umrah. They were not even within the territorial borders of Nigeria. Two, can the presiding officers of both chambers present to Nigerians comprehensive proof or evidence that the people who were shouting yes, I, and nay on that day are actually bona fide members of both chambers? Because this is a country where the absurd has happened before. We've had urchins and miscreants presented to the public as bishops. So here we are, we don't even know who the people would have voted. And how do you subject such a sensitive matter in flagrant violation of the constitutional provisions to a voice vote? And it's extremely worrying and concerning that the Senate president is a trained lawyer. You would think that in both chambers, the lawyers who are present would advise the presiding officers. Again, it is also possible that the presiding officers did not consult them. Either ways, we haven't read any accounts of a number of members of either chamber actively challenging it. So what we find is it was members from the opposition parties that challenged the procedure. From the ruling party, there is no record of any member challenging the procedure. So let's see how it goes. Now, ideally, if all things went well, that whole process should be struck down. The whole process from the proclamation to the appointment of the sole administrator, which again is something unknown to the Nigerian constitution, to the voice, to even the procedure adopted by the National Assembly. However, lately there have been a string of very interesting judgments that seasoned lawyers cannot explain, let alone defend. And I've been unable to explain some of the recent judgments that have come out. And I fear that this may go the way of a recent string of judgments. We will be presented with a judgment we do not understand. We cannot explain, we cannot rationalize, we cannot defend. But as the days lie ahead, we'll see what happens.
I'm smiling to myself because I remember somebody's statement, and the person said, if you come over to Nigeria, 1 + 1 is not 2. Sometimes it's 11, sometimes it's 22.
So it's so sad that if Nigeria is explained to you and you get it the first time, then there's a problem with what was explained to you. And it's within this conundrum or this paradox that we're trying to convince people outside the country that we're on the right track. Well, only time will tell.
Just to wrap it up on this rivers crisis, what is the prognosis? Are we ever going to stop talking about this? Is this how this is going to stretch for the next 6 months? Is it going to be a court ruling, court hearing one day after the other? What's in it? Or what's it looking like?
So sadly, we're looking at a first 6 month stretch. It could be further extended. And the real losers in all of this are the good people of Rivers State. The warring gladiators, for whatever reason, cannot be reconciled. Now, one would think that the president will call to order his man Friday, who is the minister for the Federal Capital Territory, and ask him to focus solely on his work in Abuja and leave Rivers State alone, and that when it's time for politicking towards the 2027 elections, which is any time from the third or fourth quarter next year, then he can resume his efforts. But as it is now, Mr. Wike has clearly said he's not going to reconcile, or he cannot be reconciled with the governor. Now, the governor has a 4-year mandate. That is crystal clear. And unless he's impeached by the House of Assembly, that mandate continues to run. Now, the big question here is, and I'm not sure the PDP governors put that as part of their claims, does Mr. Fubara get an additional 6 months? Because 6 months of his tenure have been suspended or frozen. It is a valid question, Sean, because for 6 months he did not function. Now, there are questions as to the legitimacy or the propriety of the said suspension. Now, if that question is answered in the positive, then Rivers State becomes an off-cycle election because they cannot hold the elections there. So there are many questions to be answered. And if they cannot be resolved, what does Mr. President do? Because his speech last week appeared one-sided. There was nowhere where Mr. Wike was equally fingered as being partly responsible for the crisis. Because remember, the 26 members of the House of Assembly are doing his bidding. It is crystal clear, even to the blind. So what it is where do we go from here? Because if you try to impeach Mr. Fubara, you started problems in Rivers State, because sadly, the whole crisis has started to take on an ethnic coloration. Now it's the Ijaw nation against the rest. And the Ijaw nation will be like, how is it possible that when it gets to a turn to produce a governor, then you guys are fomenting trouble and problems all over the place? And some prominent Ijaw citizens have said, if Fubara is impeached, there will be problems. Now, is it the Nigerian military that is stretched thin all over the country that will restore order in River State? And when the trouble starts, take your mind back to President Yar'Adua's administration. The militants severely impacted our daily crude oil production. And what that meant was reduced foreign exchange earnings. In turn, what does that lead to? Reduced FAC allocations to the states. As at the last count, at least 30 states in Nigeria today will not survive without FAC allocations. It's not happening. So there is a lot at stake beyond all of this. I wish the presidency would see beyond the interests of Mr. Wike, would see beyond the interests of 2027, and realize that Nigeria needs to be safe. But time will tell.
Indeed, time will tell. Join the conversation and send your messages, your thoughts, your opinions to 0809 444 0981. Again, 0809 444 0981. Peter from Festac says, good morning, Nigerians. See, Nigerians' lawlessness is on another level. Mr. Jayolo Niloa from Magodo GRA Sherry says, good morning, Oluwaseun. PDP governors have the right to challenge the declaration of the state of emergency in Rivers State if the procedure is faulty, especially as it concerns the suspension of the elected officials. Rexy from Surulere says, the PDP governors should indeed test this case at the Supreme Court. That will do more for our jurisprudence than all these roadside opinions that everyone and their pets are peddling like it was fact. The law is not your logic or opinion, as the 2023 Supreme Court election decision has taught us all. Oluwaseun says, the president should call Wike to order care. The whole essence of Wike's relevance to the president hinges on his ability to control the political structures of Rivers State and his ability to deliver the state in 2027 presidential elections. Okay, now let's have another story, and this one is coming from Guardian. Operatives of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, have on Monday, March 24th, 2025, busted a Ponzi scheme academy and arrested 133 suspects in Abuja.
Okay, thank you, Oluwaseun. So the headline does indeed say that 133 suspects were arrested in a raid on an alleged Ponzi university. Now, for the listeners, what is a Ponzi scheme? A Ponzi scheme is a pyramid scheme wherein the initial investors are promised incredulous returns and then encouraged to bring in other people. So as new entrants come in, the monies they contribute are then used to offset interests due to the original members. So the hope is that the inflow that comes in is greater than the outflow that needs to go out. Now, more often than not, at least almost every time, the inflow never matches the outflow and the pyramid scheme collapses. Think of MMMs, think of the chap from Cross River who did a pyramid scheme in the mid to late 90s. And innocent, well, I don't want to call them innocent people because I've studied some of these scams and I've realized that if you're not a greedy soul and you don't have the mind or mindset of an armed robber, you will subscribe to such schemes. Because when you think about it, the interest rates promised are ridiculous. And you can't tie what the business is doing to any non-legitimate economic endeavor. Now, these people were arrested before they could unleash their pains and their tricks on unsuspecting members of the public. And kudos to the EFCC that once again, they're rising up to the occasion. However, they seem to be very good when it doesn't involve politically exposed persons. When it comes to the issue of politically exposed persons, we seem to see a different side of the EFCC that is not as strong, it's not as vigorous, and I continue to wonder why. Now, the EFCC has promised that after investigations, these people will be arraigned in court. Now, the bigger problem is this. Why are Nigerians, male and female of all ages, resorting to crime? It tells you that there's a general state of hopelessness in the country. There's a general state of uncertainty as to where the next meal, where the next amount of money is coming from. People have finished school, they're not sure what they have to do. Now there's a focus on moving away from being an employee to being an employer. However, what is required, you still need money one way or the other. So you see that we have Ponzi schemes, we have terrorist attacks, we have people resorting to fraud, we have people resorting to armed robbery, because people are trying to survive and it's becoming increasingly harder. And then they see certain members of the political class who for the past 20 or 30 years do not have any known identifiable source of income, displaying huge wealth, obscene wealth and properties, and they're no longer bothering to hide it. So yes, at some point we have to ask ourselves, where are we heading? Because the next 2 or 3 generations are actually worse than the present generation in power. Very few people are still interested in hard work. Even fewer people are interested in any sort of process. They just want to move from start to finish. They're not interested in the journey. And it begs the question, if the country is like this, foreigners can see the country is like this, why would any right-thinking foreigner want to put in money here? Yes, of course, the supporters of the administration, who are called the AP sites, will tell you they've signed agreements, they've secured funding. Where is the evidence of all of this? You've secured funding. What is the funding supposed to do? What is it supposed to achieve? Where are the physical structures? You've secured investment pledges. Where are the pledges? Where are the people? So we have a ticking time bomb. We have questions we are not yet willing to answer. There's a general moral decay within the society. The initial building block, which was a family that worked, say, in the 60s up to, say, the early 80s or the early 90s, is no longer as strong. People are more focused on acquiring wealth, irrespective of the process or the source. We celebrate people whose sources of livelihood we cannot readily ascertain. So I'll give you a clear example and I'm done. The best teacher in Nigeria, the top award is 10 million. Big Brother Nigeria, or any of these reality shows, top award is in hundreds of millions. So it then tells you what we place a priority on. So the EFCC will continue to arrest hundreds of thousands of Nigerian youth because really and truly, they're trying to survive. Now, it is clear they have tech skills. Why don't we become a nation that exports tech skills to the rest of the world? Because every time these young men and women are arrested, you need to see the quantity of laptops with them. So clearly they're good at something. So reconvert them or redirect them from the path of bad to the path of good. But again, time will tell.
So are you saying that they're the ones who should be having the reintegration program and not the repentant Boko Haram terrorists?
So with these guys, if we're able to reconvert, these are the people we should be aiming to reconvert because they can earn money in Forex, which will help the country. I don't understand who a repentant Boko Haram terrorist is. How do you tell that he's truly repentant? Remember that the indoctrination would have taken place over a number of years. But here, in a number of months, we say we have successfully undone all the indoctrination he received. Why do we deceive ourselves? In other countries where terrorists are, because terrorists didn't start in Nigeria, they don't seek to reform them. They arraign them for their crimes, they have their day in court, and when they are found guilty, they're properly convicted and sentenced, and they go and do hard labor. Nobody reforms them because it's hard to reform them, show. But here we seem to have the magic wand. We seem to have the formula that nobody else has. So let's continue with the illusions and the games. We'll be fine.
I'll take this message from Adegboyega Adedeji on WhatsApp, who says it's evidently clear and proven that few of those who are pro-democracy activists during the military junta in Nigeria were only eyeing the throne, envious of the military officers, and desiring their loot and power, not necessarily that they are truly or genuine activists. The actions and inactions of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's inability to provide solutions to the suffering of Nigerians, but allowing impunity and corruption to thrive and flourish, is a testimony to the fact that their fight for democracy wasn't genuine, rather selfish. And Dada Oladimeji says, good morning, Oluwaseun, the analyst. The PDP governors and PDP members in the state, why did they not challenge Fubara's suspension for 6 months? They're all there to take care of themselves. Was any national interest discussed? No. There are shadow people ruling the nation. Tony from Marine Beach says, I still don't understand this whole talk about reconciliation between the sitting governor and his predecessor, who has a responsibility and is supposed to be governing another state. In Sena claims, Wike should be arrested for distracting the sitting governor and for the disruption in the state. It be held responsible for damages emanating from such. Is it not insane that some persons will insist on sitting on the cookie jar even after leaving office? Is it not insane that we're discussing these as a people, bottling it up in the name of some kind of agreement? How did we get here? Rexy from Surulere says, does Mr. C think foreign investment is evidenced by money entering one particular account? Look, Shell has taken a 5 billion final investment decision for the Bonga field. Stop asking weird questions.
So, Cheryl, Cheryl, I'm going to respond to Rexy because he's fond of doing this nonsense, right? A final investment decision, has it taken effect? They've only agreed that they want to invest. It's a declaration of intent to invest. And if he's not aware, a final investment decision can still be cancelled. My point still remains, all the pledges or claims of funding that have been secured, where is the evidence? What have they achieved? On the 29th of May, this administration will start its third year. We cannot continue to listen to propaganda and declarations. Where is the proof?
And on a final note, Damilola from Lagos Island has a question, and he says, were Niger Delta militants rehabilitated? Yes. So why not others?
So Niger Delta militants were rehabilitated, and we saw that when they were sent abroad for training, they started joining some of the oil firms in the oil and gas industry, either working for the IOCs or for servicing firms. And we saw that relative peace returned to that location. Now, remember that the militants were graduates. A lot of them were graduates, but were disturbed and angered by the seeming level of injustice. On the other hand, can we say the same about the non-state actors, Boko Haram, ISWAP, Lakura? They don't want anything good. They are killing people. Niger Delta militants were only abducting for ransom. That is criminal. I'm not justifying what they did. But the Niger Delta militants were not going on a killing spree. The terrorists were, and I'm disappointed that anyone would seek or try to put them on the same level or in the same category. It is extremely disappointing in 2025.
Well, unfortunately, we cannot take more, but thank you so much for your time this morning and your presence, Mr. C. Definitely will have you back. You can join and go back to this stream on YouTube at Smooth 981 FM Lagos, at Smooth 981 FM Lagos. Tomorrow we'll return on Freshly Pressed from 7:30 a.m. right here on Smooth Breakfast on Smooth 98.1. For some juicy gossips, entertainment, celebrity news, and all that on the entertainment scene, you should tune into the Grapevine at 8:15. That's what we have coming up. You and your dear listeners.
No, so are we still live?
I want to end it.